Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com. It is Monday, January 17th, 2022. Greg, are you accustomed now to writing checks or saying 2022, or are you still saying 2021 like I do sometimes?
Shit, I'm like, sometimes I go to 1985. I what the hell I am.
Welcome to Greg Gabriel Talks Football and 1985. Greg, first of all, before we start talking about football, I wanted to ask you, I know you worked a little bit with Les Grobstein, the WSCR reporter who lost his life this weekend. Would you like to say anything about Les and your encounters with him?
I didn't know Les well. The last 3 times I saw him at a Northwestern game this past fall. And then the 2 times before that were right where you are, and right there in the studio. And before that, I did 2 shows with him, both of them post first round of the draft at the Score. One was at, we went from 10 to 2. So the amazing thing to me was that I was done at 2:00 in the morning, and he still went another 3 hours.
Yeah, he was phenomenal with that late night gig, and you're talking 4, 5, 6 hours where he's basically interacting with, for the most part, with listeners. And sometimes when there were no call-ins, he would just talk, and he could talk.
Yep.
He had a memory like a steel trap, and he was an enjoyable gentleman.
There was a guy we had on one of the shows who was from the Denver area. And so because he was from semi out west, Les started bringing up the stuff about the Mountain West Conference back in the 1990s. We were both like, huh? What are you talking about?
Yeah, what was amazing about Les is that you would be talking about something, you'd ask him a question about something, and all of a sudden he'd just take a severe left-hand turn and start talking about something completely different. And it would be an interesting story, but it had nothing to do with what the topic was beforehand. He's a special guy, and our hearts go out to his family, and we wish him very well. We'll be doing more talking about Les throughout the week here at the Barroom Network. But let's turn our attention to the National Football League. I want to talk about some of those games from yesterday, but first, we got to talk about the search. The search continues. From the reports that you have been getting and seeing on the news media, and also from your sources, how do you think this is going for the Chicago Bears? Are they casting too wide of a net, or do you like the approach that they're taking?
No, I like the approach. Number one, you might be interviewing some guys that you really don't have much interest in, but you want to pick their brain. You want to pick the brain, how the organization works, etc. So that part is all good. And right now, like Dayball interviewed yesterday, they cannot hire Dayball yet. Yeah, you could make a deal with him, a little side deal with him, but he can't officially be hired until the Bills season's over. And the same thing, they interviewed Shane, the Bills assistant GM, yesterday. It's the same thing with him. He can't be hired until the season's over. So depending on how far the Bears want to go on this, some of these guys get penalized by being too good. And that's just the way the coaching searches go in the National Football League. Todd Bowles hasn't even been interviewed yet.
Right.
And he cannot be interviewed now until I think Thursday or Friday afternoon when they're done with practice, because that's when Leslie Frazier is going to be interviewed.
Right.
So if you could do 2 interviews Friday afternoon, maybe you can get Bowles in or something. Otherwise, you got to wait. It's just, and Tampa, I don't think is playing until Sunday. So then that kicks him out. If they win, that knocks him out for another week.
Yeah, right.
And in my opinion, him and Daboll are the best guys in my opinion. But it's going to be up to them. Now, my personal gut feeling is, and just go back to what George was saying last week, when he was answering some of the media questions. He goes, I'm a fan. I don't have the answers to some of these things. Then he also said, but I'm making the final decision. Yeah, he's making the final decision that Bill Polian made.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
George, this is your guy. Okay.
That's hilarious. Yeah, who's he trying to fool? We got breaking news here, courtesy of Bryce, and I've checked this. This is correct, according to Field Yates. Breaking, the Bears have requested to interview Chiefs Executive Director of Player Personnel Ryan Poles for their vacant GM's job. Thank you, Bryce, for that. This is a great one. The people in the chat room are helping us with breaking news. Outstanding. What do you know about Ryan Poles?
I don't know much about Poles. He's one guy I don't know. I got a lot of these guys I've interacted with, known for years. I know Dodds. I don't know Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. And in my opinion, he's the vice president of football operations for the Browns. And that's the type of job you give him. He's not now I'm sure he's done some evaluation, but he's a former college basketball player. How strong an evaluator is he? And you want your GM is making the final decision on evaluations. And so unless you got a superb staff underneath you, is that the guy you want? And I'm sure there's a ton of things that he does really, really well, but in the role that they're interviewing people for, does he really fit the criteria?
Yeah, it almost seems to me like this is one of those interviews, like you said, you're collecting information. The Chiefs, of course, have had a lot of success in acquiring talented football players. And so perhaps, this is Polian's approach to, seeing how that all works over with that organization.
Right. And the first name that came out last week, and I might have been last Monday, at worst case scenario, it was Tuesday, was Morocco Brown. And Morocco hadn't been interviewed yet.
Yeah.
Now he's expecting to be interviewed, but what I think is going on is in this first wave, they're trying to talk to as many people as they can talk to, given the rules. So there's certain guys, on certain days that you can get, there's other guys that you can't. And so, there's some days this week when they can fit in a Morocco, but you want to get like Poles. I don't think they can interview Poles now until the weekend or something, because the Chiefs are still playing.
Yeah. So, it's almost looking to me more and more like the Chicago Bears might hire a head coach before the general manager. How much
I don't know if that's the case. You can, now here's what you can do is you can settle on a GM and have him, and not officially hire him, and have him have conversations just like you and I are having, and say, Ryan, why don't you call Brian here and have a talk? And there's little things like that I think you can do to, and I'm not 100% sure on this, just to circumvent the system.
Sure.
They can't hire anybody until, I mean, that's a definite, until their season is over. So guys like Peterson, Caldwell, Everfluss, those guys could be hired. So if they felt real good about it. Now, let's go back when they hired Matt Nagy 4 years ago. They had only interviewed a couple guys when they did Nagy. Were impressed with that and tried to get it done. I think because they thought that the Colts were going to beat them to the punch. Well, I know for a fact the Colts weren't going to hire them. Okay. But, so this time I think they're being a little bit more patient. Nobody's been hired yet. The top candidates are guys that are, working for teams that are still playing. In most cases, there's some good guys out there that are out of work. You hear some negatives on Peterson, but he did take a team to the Super Bowl. There's negatives on Flores. There's a lot of red flags on him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the guy's, he's a pretty good coach. So when you're doing not only is the interview important, trying to get the answers, but, you want to research, make calls to people he's worked with, might be to Belichick or some people up in New England, talk to Chris Greer or whoever else is down there in Miami that they can talk to. Reggie McKenzie is a real good example. Reggie's being brought in, and Reggie's a high-level executive for Miami. So if anybody can give you a straight shot on Flores, it's Reggie McKenzie.
No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
so then you want to find out the truth, so to speak. So there's rumors, and we know how that works. There's truth and there's rumors, and you just want to make sure you get the most successful candidate that is a fit for your organization. Now I see the guy up there is the Dodds interviews today.
Right.
I know Chris loves him. But they got a relationship. They worked together at Texas A&M Kingsville before it was called Texas A&M Kingsville. It's called Texas A&I back then.
Okay.
And so they got a very close relationship. It was one of the first guys Chris hired when he got the Indianapolis job.
Chris Ballard, right?
Yes. But there's guys that I know that have been on, known Dodds for years that have been on the road with them. So you can have them.
Really?
They just, it's the interaction with other scouts. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is kind of important.
Okay.
When I was on the road, I used to always scout other scouts because there might be a situation where you got to hire somebody.
Absolutely.
And that's how I ended up hiring Mark Sadowski. I spent a lot of time on the road with him, being at the same school, saw him how he works at pro days and things like that. So you still don't know, even though you could see his work ethic. You can see it when he's in the scouts room watching video. Is he bullshitting with other people, or is he got his head into the tape and not saying a word? I never said a word. I used to just shut up and just watch tape. And I would much rather be by myself than be in a room with 6 or 7 other people. Because when you get that many people in a room, too many people start talking and you can't concentrate and you can't get your job done. So what you're looking for when you're seeing guys on the road is professionalism, I guess, is the best way of putting it.
Sure.
And, finding what the guy is like, personality, how he gets along with other people. But what you don't know, he might tell you that he likes this player, doesn't like this player, and even why. but you don't know if he's telling the truth because you haven't read his reports, and you're never going to see his reports.
That's right.
Okay, so, and that's the key. I mean, it takes you a while to find out. Like when I came in here, there was, we hired 2 guys, we kept 4 guys, got rid of 2 guys. It took a while to find out how good each one was and what was his strengths, what was his weaknesses. When we cross-checked by position. So then I had to match guys with, like a guy who was real good with the defensive line. I had to have that guy be the defensive line cross-checker. And somebody who was real good with defensive backs do that, and that's really, really important for the way we did it.
So would they still get an area of the country?
Oh yeah, I'm talking that what happened. We didn't even start our cross checks until December.
Gotcha. Okay.
They never left their area. So and so they would get, you can use Ballard. Ballard had Oklahoma, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Arkansas. Okay, so he could hit all those big schools as many times as he wanted. And if he felt he had to go back to the little schools, the smaller schools, he could, but he knew that area because I didn't send him out to the West Coast to do something or send him to the East, and when I was with the Giants, you only went into a school one time in the course of a fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then there might be 4 other guys behind you if you were the first guy in. So we didn't like that. Jerry and I discussed that, when I was hired, and we said, no, we're going to do it differently. And we thought we had success that way because heck, say I always put my hat on. We drafted 12 Pro Bowlers.
Nice draft.
So
nice collection of players over that time.
Yep. Now I'm cheating with one. Greg Olson was a Pro Bowler, not with us, but he was a Pro Bowler, and it's not my fault that he.
Thank you for clearing that up because I'm still angry about that whole thing.
That one's all on Martz.
Oh my goodness,
Mike Martz.
Couple of questions here. I know that you've talked very highly about Brian Daboll. In fact, he's one of your top candidates along with Todd Bowles. The Factor says, what do you ask Greg what he thinks about Daboll being a leader as a head coach? Anything?
That's the one thing I don't know.
Okay.
Because I haven't, I've been around Todd Bowles.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen how Todd interacts with other players, with a group, etc. Daboll, I don't know that, but you just, I tweeted it out Saturday night during the game. He was putting a few exclamation points on that resume.
He was.
Yeah, just getting it into another topic. You look at those games. Who were the best 3 teams in this first round? It was Tampa Bay, Buffalo, and Kansas City.
Yeah, that's right. And all with excellent candidates on their squads.
Right. The only thing, I'm not a Bieniemy fan, and not because I don't really know him.
Right.
But it's a non-play caller from the Andy Reid tree, and that's what we just had.
We just saw that movie, and it was not a good one.
Right. And so it's like, no, I'm not going back to that one. And that's the same thing with Hackett up in Green Bay.
Yeah, Nathaniel Hackett. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, he doesn't call the plays. Yeah. So
right.
What are you getting? The Factor wants to know about if you hire a guy like Daboll, are we just going to see the Kansas City Chiefs offense again with a different play caller?
No, it's a totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different scheme. Here's the unique thing about Daboll is that he truly fits the scheme to his players.
Mm-hmm.
This passing offense changed. Now, granted, Josh Allen has improved along the way, but when they got Diggs last year from Minnesota,
mm-hmm.
they changed their passing game a little bit
to suit his skills.
And they also got Beasley.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're able to do things that they couldn't do before they got those guys. And now, as the tight end was up and down up until this year, Dawson Knox, and now he's becoming, especially the last half of the season, he's becoming a real big part of that offense. And he is not like Kmet. He's your athletic guy, like Kittle and those types of guys. He's, he can block, but he's never going to be a grade A blocker. The run game for Buffalo has gotten better this last third of the season. They ran the ball very well against New England, who stopped them at the beginning. They played New England 3 times in the last 5 weeks.
Wow.
And once the Buffalo lost, and that was in that, it was a storm. It was 40-mile-an-hour winds. It was cold. They only threw the ball New England only threw the ball 4 times or 5 times the whole game and ran. And Buffalo didn't stop the run very well. And Allen didn't have one of his better days. 3 weeks later, they play in New England and Buffalo killed them. And so, but you look at the way the betting was going before the game Saturday, people were, because they were looking at the weather, it was going to be, colder than 5 degrees, and it was going to be windy, but not that bad. And so they were betting the under and taking the points. Mm-hmm. Bookies made a ton of money. I saw one where Buffalo was Buffalo's total was the over under was 51. Buffalo had 47.
Are you like most of us here in Chicago and throughout the country who love to see the Patriots get absolutely embarrassed in the postseason, like Adeptus says?
Well, because I'm a Buffalonian. And so, when I was growing up, the rivalry wasn't New England, it was Miami. And they couldn't beat Miami, and then they started just beating Miami every time. And that's after, when Kelly came and they had that K-gun offense and they went to 4 Super Bowls. Then when Belichick and Brady go to New England, then New England became the bully. Mm-hmm. And for, I think, over about a 16-year period, Bills only won about 5 games or something. Mm-hmm. But now they've won, I think, 3 out of the last 4 or 4 out of the last 5. So it's changing. Yeah. And they got the quarterback now. And I think Mac Jones is going to be a real good pro, but I've said this before, I think his ceiling is lower than some of the guys, Justin Fields, Lawrence. I can't really speak for Lance or for Wilson yet, but I think those guys have higher ceilings. But in the case of Fields, the same thing with Lawrence, who the hell are they going to hire? Because that's going to be very, very important in the development of these quarterbacks.
Yeah. Adeptus has a really good question. I agree with him, at least insofar as the GM candidates. He says that it seems like the crop of available candidates this year is really good compared to previous years. Do you feel the same? I mean, there's just a lot of really interesting candidates out there.
There's some good names, and to give some credit to the Bears, they're talking to all of them. Now, some names, I get a kick out of reading stuff on Twitter and some of these bloggers and some of the other things that say, oh, this is the best guy, this guy. How the hell do they know? They don't know who's good, who's bad, or who's indifferent. You know what you read. Yeah. But some of these guys got people that are really got strong PR people, or people in the media that they know that are pushing their names. And so Dodds is one of them, that he's the best guy. He's the number one candidate. I saw, Tom Pelissero said that today on the NFL Network. Is he really? Unless you sit down and talk with these people, find out their philosophy, and talk to people who've worked with them and talk to people who've been around them, you don't know that. And so, it's real easy to sit back and say, oh, they blew the hire. Mm-hmm. But you know, in Philly, when they hired Andy Reid years ago,
Mhm.
everybody was laughing at him. He wasn't even a coordinator.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and Green Bay took a lot of grief when they hired LaFleur.
Hmm. As somebody pointed out in the chat, he never called his plays prior to.
Right, that's right. But he had called plays before, not called plays for the Rams.
Gotcha.
McVay, he had called plays in college.
Gotcha. Okay. James Christo wants to know, why isn't Greg Roman's name out there on interview lists? It seems to be a name that was popular not too long ago, but has hardly been mentioned.
It's a good question. We actually talked about this, I think, a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
You go back when he was in San Francisco, Harbaugh was the head coach. Mm-hmm. Roman's name was hot. Okay, and he was getting interviews. Nothing happened. Then he had at least 2 stops before Baltimore since then. One I know was Buffalo. It might have been something in between Buffalo and Baltimore. But before he got to Baltimore, the star got tarnished. Mm. And now that he was back in Baltimore, it got good again. But I think some people are saying, is it him or was it Lamar Jackson?
A lot of people are asking that question.
And when you talk to Daboll, and this is one of the reasons I like him so much, again, not knowing what kind of leader he is, just football coach, is that we all know the faults that Josh Allen had coming out of Wyoming. Mm-hmm. He was not accurate. He never threw for 60% when he was in college. I think he was for his career, it was around 56, and I don't have the stats right in front of me, but it was in that area. And, the general rule of thumb has been, since I've been doing this, is that guys who aren't accurate in college don't all of a sudden become accurate once they get to the NFL, because the windows are so much smaller. Coverage is better. And yet he did it. And actually Lamar Jackson did it too. Because Lamar Jackson was another 55% completion percentage guy. But not only did Allen become accurate, he went from 2019 to 2020, went from 59% to 69%, better than 69%. Mm-hmm. Most of the 2020 season, he was over 70%. This year, he was around 67. Mm-hmm. But still, he's up 10 points from what he was 2 years ago. You never see that. And a lot of that has to do with just Allen himself and the work he did in the off season. But also it's Daboll and the character of, if Justin Fields has 1/10 of the character that Josh, football character I'm talking about, and that's the work ethic and that desire to be great. If he has 1/10 of the character that Josh Allen has, then he's going to be a hell of a football player when you get him with the right coach.
Yeah. Fascinating. Let's see. Adeptus wants to know about Leslie Frazier. How much credit does the former Bears cornerback, who's now the defensive coordinator with the Bills, how much does Frazier get for the Bills defense, and how much goes to McDermott? Can we even separate the two? Can we even figure that out?
Frazier, I've asked that question. That's Frazier's running the defense. Mm-hmm. And, I've talked to some people. Nobody says a bad thing about him. Here's the only negative. You ever see any emotion?
None.
and that's the thing. I George McCaskey may know more than most of us. At least he was around him when he was a player, mm-hmm. Here in Chicago. But you never see any emotion at all. He's and I was having a conversation with a former GM a couple days ago and talking about him, and he knows him well. And we both said we used the same word, stoic. Mm. He's but he gets the job done. And who that is when you, and I'm not trying to put this guy on Mount Rushmore, but you know who was like that? Tony Dungy.
Okay.
Didn't say a whole lot, didn't raise his voice, but was one hell of a leader.
He got everybody's respect. There's no doubt about that.
In fact, did you watch, I think it was Saturday, Dungy was talking about, the hiring of head coaches.
No, I missed that.
On the pregame show before the Bills game. And he said, when you hire a head coach, it has nothing to do with X's and O's. It has everything to do with leadership and developing a culture.
So that perhaps has been well, I don't want to throw Matt Nagy or John Fox under the bus with that, because they were interested in creating a very positive culture. But sometimes when you don't win, no matter what you're doing with culture, it's all moot. I mean, you've got to win games no matter what culture you got. We've seen teams with terrible cultures like the Raiders of yesteryear, and the Dallas Cowboys had interesting cultures with guys partying all the time and not being role models, so to speak, but they win. But how important is building a culture for a football team? How can you prioritize that for us?
Well, first of all, define culture.
Yeah. That's a great question.
Because you could probably write a book, and it has so many different variations on it.
Indeed.
It's I don't think if you've got some personalities in the locker room, like Olin, say. That's personality. But
that's right.
and that group, that O-line group. Now I'm sure you used to go down to Bourbonnais.
Yeah.
Okay, and what was that bar kitty corner from campus?
Yeah, I forgot the name of it, but yeah,
I know I've been in it 1,000 times, but those guys would go there 1 or 2 nights a week during camp, and they close the joint. Yeah. And they get fined, and Olin was the leader, and Olin, Roberto Garza, Reuben Brown, they were all there. And you know what? Harry was the coach. So what? We got fined. But that was so. But the culture on those football teams,
they were tight,
was excellent.
Yeah.
Team was close, and hey, I saw some arguments now, down in the locker room, one in the training room, between an offensive guy and a defensive guy, and I'm like, oh shit, I got to get out of here. I might get hurt just being in the same room.
Yeah, you don't want any shrapnel wounds.
Right, and nothing did happen, but you got a bunch of alpha dogs running around, and stuff like that happens. But the culture is it's team. Yeah. And you winning, you put winning above everything, and working hard, and you work together. That doesn't mean you're not going to argue with one of your teammates.
Yes. And challenge them. And
hey, everybody knows about what happened at the FBI shooting range with Olin and Fred Miller.
Yeah, you want to share that story again for those who haven't heard it?
Well, I wasn't here. I mean, I wasn't there. Excuse me, I was here because I had been to that range. That was a great time going there.
Yeah, it's an FBI shooting range.
Yeah, it's right next to the Great Lakes Naval Base.
Okay.
And it's almost like part of the Great Lakes Naval Base. And the SWAT team does a lot of training there. They got these video things where you're going into a house, and then all of a sudden these people jump up in front of you, and you got to make a instantaneous decision whether it's a good guy or a bad guy. And you've got to play gun, and if you shoot the gun and kill the guy, and it was really a good guy, you flunk.
Yeah.
And but that type of thing. And then there's
Well, hold on before you move on. And so a number of Bears players were there, and there was an
Right.
argument. So tell us the rest of this.
Well, you get done with the cops and robbers stuff, and then these guys, from the SWAT team, they put a bunch of food out and they start barbecuing and you're drinking beer and you're having a good time. And then, Olin and Fred, who are on the same side of the ball, got into it a little bit.
Got a little heated.
But true story.
Yeah.
That got shut down. That didn't come from here. Shutting down us being able to go. That went all the way to the office of the President of the United States.
Oh my goodness.
Because that was some bad publicity.
Yeah. When that got out, it was not good for the country, for the FBI, and for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah. So we used to be able to go. I went over a couple times. We used to be able to go, designated days.
Uh-huh.
They'd set it up. And Tommy Dillon, who was the head of security for the Bears, was an ex-FBI agent and used to run the SWAT team. So that's where the whole connection came that got us over there.
Interesting. Great stuff. All right. So I want to get to a few more of these questions. Muck has an attitude that I am seeing grow on social media, and that is impatience. He says, just identify the guy you want and hire him. Stop dragging this process out.
Well, first of all, like I say, if it's somebody like a Todd Bowles, a Dave Bowl, or somebody like that, you can't hire him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's working.
Exactly.
By league rules, you cannot. You can do what the Colts did, and then it ended up backfired with them with McDaniels 4 years ago, and they thought they had to deal with him. And they hired about 6 coaches that McDaniels wanted on his staff, and then he reneged on the deal after the Super Bowl.
Crazy.
And you know what? That's why he's not a coach right now.
Yeah, and probably won't be.
Payback's a bitch.
Yep, exactly. That was dirty stuff. You talked about this last week, but for those who didn't hear it, people want to know your opinions on Champ Kelly.
I've met Champ a couple times. Very delightful person, intelligent guy, easy to get along with. Everybody in the building speaks very highly of him. But again, I don't know how good an evaluator he is, because I haven't seen a reporter or had him, listen to him talking about players. But people like him. He's well thought of. It wouldn't shock me if he ends up being the guy. Put it that way. I saw something where somebody tweeted out something yesterday. I don't remember who it was that, he knocked him dead with his interview. Well, I guarantee you they ain't telling you who did good or who did bad.
Yeah, they're keeping
that secret. Where do people get this stuff?
Yeah.
And I've known Polian since 1984. He isn't going to say anything unless he wants to leak something. And you got to be careful with leaks.
Yeah,
because leaks are usually lies.
That's right.
Remember, it's the lying season. The season's over.
Yeah, that's right. Lying season has commenced.
Yes, darn right.
What about Harbaugh, your feelings on the former 49ers coach who's now at Michigan? I know you're not a big fan of Michigan, but that's not going to sway.
No, I don't even think he's in the conversation. And I'll tell you what, I tweeted it out the other day. And the main reason, he hired a coach away from Notre Dame on Friday that had been at Notre Dame 12 years. Guy had recommitted to when they had the turnover. Kelly asked the guy to go down to LSU with him. He said, no, he's staying with Notre Dame. His kids have been there for, 12 years. 2 girls are in high school. They wanted to graduate from high school in South Bend, but he's a Michigan alum. But do you think he's going to leave a secure job like that? And everybody's been talking for months that Harbaugh might, make the jump back to the NFL. And so do you think he would leave a job like Notre Dame as a defensive line coach to go to Michigan with the thought that the head coach might leave?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, don't you think that would be a little part of the conversation?
Absolutely.
Right. And so to me, that said it all right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
That he's not going anywhere. He would lose if Harbaugh left, especially after hiring Mike Elfson on Friday. The official hire came actually this morning. It was on, they tweeted it out, but it was a done deal on Friday. He would lose so much credibility within the assistant coach community for doing that, because then Mike Elston's out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's got a contract, but the next guy in doesn't have to keep him. And chances are he isn't, because he's going to want his own guys.
Yeah, indeed. What's going to happen to the scouts that have worked with Ryan Pace the last few years? Will the new staff bring in their own guys? What is the process generally on that?
Okay. Generally speaking, unless there's a guy the new GM can get right off the bat to be, say, a director of player personnel, it's going to be status quo until after the draft. Then after the draft, he's going to use that. I'm speaking very generally here.
Okay.
But, after the draft, or between now and the draft, he's going to be evaluating those guys. Who do I like? Who don't I like? Now, some of them, I'm sure he already knows and knows well. So, but he'll go through that. He'll see who he wants to keep, who he doesn't want to keep, and then make a decision post-draft. So don't be a bit surprised to see a turnover within 48 hours of the draft.
I think that's what we saw with Ryan Pace after his first draft. It was 48, 72 hours. There were a number of changes made on the Bears.
Now, some guys with, the decision maker type guys, Lucas, Champ Kelly, some of those guys, they could be out the door, because this guy's going to want his own group of lieutenants. Just like when Jerry came in, he brought in myself and Bobby DePaul. And every other guy does it too. You bring in Chris brought in Dodds and Morocco. He kept the pro guy. But there's not a GM in the league that doesn't do that.
Absolutely.
Because you got to have the people that and you trust, and you respect their opinion. And in the case with Jerry and I, we had worked together in New York for 4 years, became very good friends. And so I talked to Jerry at least a couple times a month in between him leaving the Giants in 87 until we came to here in June of 01.
Okay.
That was a 14-year period.
Yeah. I want to, again, move to some of these questions. We got a lot of good ones. We got a huge audience today, Greg. We talked about, you mentioned Dodds and the reputation that he had among some scouts, that, he wasn't the most beloved person, but he's very good at his job. And then I was reading this week, doing some research on Bill Polian. Bill Polian came with a lot of baggage too. That one of the reasons, I saw an article, now again, this is the news media, so believe what you want out of it. But there was an article that one of the reasons Jim Irsay fired Bill Polian was because he wanted his team back, because Bill Polian was so secretive about operations that sometimes he even kept the owner in the dark about some of the things that he was plotting. And he had his son as the general manager, and so that made things even easier.
Well, his son was assistant GM, I think, wasn't he?
Assistant GM. Yeah, I think he got promoted at one point to general manager, but I'll have to double check that. So Marty Dack asks, who's the bigger jerk, Polian or Dodds?
Well, I number one, I've known Bill since the day he came in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in 1984. The XFL folded.
Mm-hmm.
And here's how the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Norm Powell was the director of player personnel for the Buffalo Bills. He was my mentor. He hired me part-time in 1981 and taught me a whole lot. And Norm passed away watching the national championship game 3 years ago, and in his mid-90s. So he lived a good life. I hope he used to always smoke these big cigars and drink scotch. So I hope he had a big cigar and a glass of scotch with him when he went. But anyway, he needed a pro guy, and at that time, really, having a pro personnel director was kind of new. Not everybody had one, but he wanted a pro guy, and his daughter Debbie worked for Polian and Marv Levy with the Chicago Blitz.
Okay, yeah, I remember those days.
And John Butler was there too.
Mm-hmm.
And so Norm's daughter, Debbie, highly recommended Bill to Norm, and Norm hired him off of his daughter's recommendation.
Wow!
And
a Hall of Fame career was born.
Right, but he was, and I'll give you another story. When I can't remember the guy who was the GM at that time. He was only the GM for a couple of years, and he, had some health issues. Had come from the Giants, and he had a step down, and Mr. Wilson originally offered the job to Norm. Norm said, I don't want it. He was older. He didn't want to deal with that. He goes, make Bill the GM. And that's how Polian ended up getting the job. And Polian, bullheaded might be a good way of describing him.
Okay.
Extremely smart. Very, very smart. And, when he thinks he's right, whether he is or not. He's not going to change his opinion. And there's, early on in his career, there's a lot of stories out there when, doing negotiations and getting in arguments with agents and things like that. But, like anybody else, he was still hard to negotiate with. He was a very, very tough negotiator, but he calmed down. I mean, he was a chain smoker back when he started, and, cut that out.
Good for him.
But you can't take away his football knowledge. That's why I said, I said jokingly the other day, and we said it here a little at the beginning of the show. If George and Ted aren't going to listen to him, he's got the personality where he's going to walk out the door.
Really? I mean, he's that strong-headed, huh?
Oh yeah. Well, you got me. If you got the answers, then why am I here?
Well, so this is a great question to bring up now. The Factor asks, what do you think of the Bears search team of Sue Campbell, Tanisha Wade, George, Ted, and of course Polian? Factor thinks it's a little odd. What are your overall impressions of having this search committee? Do you think that's too much? Do you think there's the possibility of it becoming combustible?
Who's the lead guy?
Bill Polian.
And the lead guy's Bill. Who's doing most of probably 80% of the questions are coming from Bill. And in the case of Soup, and I'm guessing here, in the case of Soup, he's like representing the players. That's what his job is.
Yeah, player engagement, I believe, is a title.
Right, like and I'll tell you, it's an important job too. Players got a problem, that's the guy he goes to. but he knows the players. He knows the players really, really well. So I think from a standpoint where he might not be asking very many questions, he's just listening. And he can offer, well, with this group we got here, I don't like this guy, or I really like this guy. He's gonna fit in. I think with Kenesha, it's strictly experience.
To get her experience.
Yes.
Okay.
And Ted's been involved in a few of these things, so Ted's going to have his own set of questions, and the same with George. But they're going to, just like they leaned on Ernie, they're going to lean on Polian. Now, I was, and I didn't know this because Joe Banner and I communicate. Mostly it's text, but Joe is consulting a couple teams on searches right now. And he came out and said it on Twitter either last night or today that, but he's not saying who he's recommending. But he did say that the majority of his candidates, and he said that it's not because we're trying to push minority candidates, it's because there are more of them and stronger. And so
he goes, great pipeline.
So he goes, there's a good, strong group of minority candidates. All of them get hired this year? Probably not. But I think you'll see, a fair share, and then go from there. I don't like when people start bringing in the race thing. I want to hire the best guy.
Absolutely. And I got into a debate with someone on social media, which I hate to do, but so I ended up saying, give me a call. Let's talk about this. And we did. But the idea, the person I was talking to did not like the fact that Tanisha Wade was on the search committee. And so I tried to explain my point of view as to how I think her role is that she's going to, when she gets an opportunity to ask questions, she's going to ask questions to make sure that GM candidate or coaching candidate is an inclusive person and isn't going to have problems with certain types of players. And so I'll give you an example. Leslie Frazier, when he was the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, the punter on that team, Chris Cluey, came out openly in favor of same-sex marriage. And this was about, 15 years ago and so forth. And so Frazier called Cluey into his office and said, I would appreciate it if, and I'm paraphrasing, if you didn't go public with that. And Cluey had a talk with the owner of the team who told him, you know what, I really appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the good work. And so Cluey told Frazier that, and Frazier was like, well, I guess I was overruled. So perhaps Tanisha is going to ask, how do you feel about that situation now? Because things have changed over the last 15 years, and there are more and more players who are gay coming forward and announcing that they're gay and so forth. And so that could potentially be why she could be of some value in the search. Your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I know for a fact there have been a lot of gay players in the league. Okay, they just never came out. So, and a lot of times your teammates know. And know what players care about? Does he play hard?
Right.
Can he play? Does he deserve the job he has? And is he doing a good job? That's the important thing to players. They I think some of that other stuff, the media might make a bigger thing about it than the players actually do. And I don't want to, throw a dart at the media. It's just that it becomes news then. And, we don't, especially in places like this, everything becomes part of the news cycle, no matter what happens, instead of letting guys just live.
Yeah. And so, and in any case, I like the idea that the search committee is diverse and that there is then a possibility of people asking questions and then after interviews debating certain issues. And so if the search committee is all allowed to speak openly and share their opinions, this could end up being a great thing. But if Bill Polian feels dictatorial about it, it could backfire and could get messy.
Well, I don't think he would do that, but his job is to find the right football guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and like I say, Soup, I'm saying he's the guy that's kind of representing the players here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And with Tanisha, it's a diversity thing. I really think that, like I said a few minutes ago, I don't think they're going to be all that involved with asking questions. I think they'll be more involved in the discussion when the interview's done.
Fair.
And then throw in their 2 cents, what they liked, what they didn't like. Soup was a former player,
Mm-hmm.
so and with his job right now, you can get a good amount of feedback from him being in that position. This is a brand new position for Tanisha that she's only been in for a few months. And like I just said a little while ago, I think this is more for experience
Mm-hmm.
for her and a learning thing. And so, she could be the silent partner in the equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's going to be excellent for her development.
Absolutely. She's been called a rising star in the organization. Her experience with the team has been the director of special events and so forth. And so that clearly is outside the football operations realm. And
Right.
So bringing her into the search committee could be a great way to groom her for more experiences down the line. Good stuff. I want to get a couple more questions out of the way here before we start talking about those games from this week, because there was so many great things. Let's see. Factor asks, if someone hires Champ Kelly as general manager, do the Bears get any draft picks?
No.
Yeah, that's not the case.
First of all, if he'd have to be, if somebody wanted to talk to Champ, he's under contract to the Bears. They got to put in a permission slip.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bears can say yay or nay. But if it's a GM job that has the tag attached to it, meaning control the 53-man roster, you have to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
You can say you got to wait till the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
In the Bears' case, the season's over. So,
right.
they have to grant it. And as far as I know, this is the only job that he's getting a shot at.
Yeah.
You haven't seen his name mentioned at all. In fact, I'm kind of surprised that you don't see Reggie McKenzie's name more.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sam Rappaport, who works at the NFL, she's an executive with the diversity team. She almost guaranteed that Champ Kelly is going to be a general manager sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. She was so high on his leadership skills and his knowledge and so forth. But it may not be this year, because I agree with you. I have not seen his name outside of being interviewed by the Chicago Bears. I have not seen his name.
Part of it is the Bears haven't had success.
Yeah, that hurts.
Okay, so that doesn't help. And he was, when you look at the chain of command within football ops, he was like third.
Mm-hmm.
You had Ryan Pace, then he had his hand-picked lieutenant in Lucas, and then Champ.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you made final decisions, even though he might be the best guy in the room evaluation-wise,
Mm-hmm.
how strong is his voice with the other two above him? Do you follow what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to take anything away from him. It's how that works. I would be almost willing to bet that there's a chance that, let's say Champ doesn't get the job,
Mm-hmm.
that he stays.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas is gone. And the same thing with the cap guy.
Interesting.
Out.
And Greg, what's your personal philosophy about when you're searching for candidates to fill open positions? Do you give a little special more weight to in-house candidates, or is it an open playing field when it comes to the search process?
I think you got to be very open-minded. And I'll give you an example, because I was talking to some people down at Notre Dame. They had their receiver coach wasn't kept. Marcus Freeman didn't keep the receivers coach.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a bunch of, a handful of candidates, brought, I think, 3 in for interviews. The guy who was rated number 3 out of the 3 going in hit the grand slam in the interview,
Mm-hmm.
and jumped over the other 2 and got the job.
Interesting. Okay.
And so the interview process itself is very, very important, how you conduct yourself. See, that's one of the concerns I have. I only hear this, secondhand,
Mm-hmm.
that Daboll might not be a great interview. I know he's a great coach. Yeah, I see that every Sunday. But he might not be a great interview. So, but now in his case, he's got a relationship going back probably close to 30 years, if not longer, with Polian.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to help him. But I can tell you, I'll just say, because it's on my mind too.
Sure.
They interviewed, Shane yesterday from the Bills assistant GM yesterday too. They're going to get his take.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you rather have? If we had to take if we had our choice between Leslie Frazier and Brian Daboll, who's your guy?
Yeah. Well, and they did that with, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the defensive coordinator's name under Lovie Smith, Rod Marinelli.
Rod Marinelli.
They didn't take his advice.
Yeah, he said Bruce Arians.
And he left town when they hired Mark Trestman. Smart man, that Marinelli.
Now, speaking of that, Marinelli is a guy that's very, very high on Eberfluss.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And he recommended Eberfluss to Chris for the Colts job.
Oh, wow.
DC
Great
job.
suggestion. Great suggestion.
Yeah. And Eberfluss worked for Marinelli when Marinelli was the DC down in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Marinelli might be available again as, he's my age, if not older.
Right.
He's the Raiders D-line coach right now.
Oh, okay.
Who the hell knows what's going to happen there? And this is kind of interesting, because I didn't know the answer. So I sent some texts out to some people to find out. The interim head coach done a hell of a job there.
Really, really has.
And so I said, well, can they just elevate him? Nope.
No.
Nope. You got to go through the process, and they got to go through the Rooney Rule.
Oh, wow.
They can't. He's earned the job,
Yeah,
but
really
you still got to open it up.
That seems silly.
Now you can do a sham interview and make up your mind beforehand. Yeah, Rick Bisaccia is getting the job, and interview some people. But it used to be, when you were doing like Rooney Rule type things, if you could interview people in house and it counted. Now they got to be outside.
Mm-hmm.
Like Champ Kelly doesn't count as a Rooney Rule interview.
Mm-hmm. Are you sure about that? Because I thought that Rooney Rule now applies to general managers and.
Well, yes, it applies to all high-level front office and coaching positions. But what I'm saying is, because they got to be outside the building.
I understand. Gotcha.
Okay, so if you interview a guy inside, you still got to do 2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. couple of other questions here before we start talking about yesterday's football action or this weekend's. Do you believe, Jeremy asked, that Chris Ballard is selling everyone on Morocco Brown over Dodds because Brown is a minority and the Colts would get a comp pick? But again, we don't know if that's necessarily true. I'm going to do some research on that, Jeremy. And on next week's show, we'll talk more about that with Greg about compensation for minority.
There is, that was a new thing last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there is comp picks involved
Mm-hmm.
when you hire a minority.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I don't like that.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, tell you the truth, I think it's kind of racist myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, let's put everybody on an even playing field and pick the best guy.
Right.
Look, with Morocco, I've known Morocco for 21 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with him for 7. I know him as well as anybody. He is a quality candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Smart, great evaluator. He's been in high-level positions before, gotten some bad situations in Washington and Cleveland, and those aren't necessarily his fault. They're not. Not necessarily is not even the right word. Those aren't his fault. He took the job, but he didn't. How they turned out. Cleveland, they were turned over Cleveland every 6 months. Because of the way the ownership was. And what's been going on in Washington all these years.
Mm-hmm.
So. But now he's been in a very stable environment in Indy. Chris and Morocco came into Hallis Hall within a couple of weeks of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So back in June of 2001. So, Morocco knows the people involved. Now, did he have a big interaction with ownership and with Ted back then? No, not really. But they still know him, and he knows them,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows how they operate, knows how the Bears operate.
Yes.
And, so that is kind of an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I take Morocco over Dodds.
Yeah, I can only judge based on interviews that I've seen with these guys. Morocco has a very colorful way of describing prospects and how they play. He'd be a fun guy to have from a media standpoint. He'd be a fun guy to have leading the Bears. But
Morocco's a pretty good player. I mean, he wasn't an NFL player, but he was a pretty darn good player. He was an inside linebacker at North Carolina State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. The last question that I have, and it's something that you have talked about, but it's been asked multiple times in the chat room. The first question that is asked of all these head coaching candidates is, drum roll, please. One more time. Greg, say it again. Who are you bringing in as your coordinators?
Well, that's not the first question necessarily, but that is very, very important part.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that, it's your whole staff.
Mm-hmm.
And if a guy's not prepared, then that's going to come out, real bright and clear
Mm-hmm.
to everybody. And you can't have one name. This guy's going to be my offensive coordinator, because what if you can't get him?
Yeah.
And it's happened where, you got a buddy who's, with the 49ers, and he says, yep, I'm coming. And then you put in the permission slip, and the 49ers say, no, he's not.
Mm-hmm.
They won't give permission for him to make the move. And so you've got to have a list 3 or 4 deep. So that means, your list is only as good as the worst guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you go through those guys and you try to find out the strengths and weaknesses of those guys and who they are, where are they right now? Are they coming from college, or are they coming, and there's nothing wrong. Lovey's staff, when Lovey came here, how about this? Was the most inexperienced staff in the league.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
As far as NFL experience, a lot of college guys.
Interesting.
That was the original staff.
The original staff. What year did he come in?
2004.
2004. All right, let's start talking about NFL action because I can field these questions for another 2 hours. This is a good way to lure people back to our next show. We'll answer your questions at our next show. Let's talk about probably the game of the weekend so far is the Cowboys 49ers game. Your impressions?
I didn't watch the last 5 minutes when I was at the gym because I had grandchildren here. I think they're still here. I locked up in this room. My wife was going to take them home. I don't know if she took them home yet. They've been here since Friday. And so we're going to eat dinner. So it's like, we're eating dinner now. TV's coming off. So yes, sir. So you know how that works.
Oh,
and
sure.
So I didn't see the last 5 minutes in the controversial place. I saw when I was in the gym, and of course there's no volume. There's a big screen, and they got everything. They're showing everything, and then McCarthy's getting a lot of heat over the quarterback draw play,
right,
and stuff. Way I look at it, when I was watching that game, San Francisco was the dominant team.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the right team won.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I'm not a Dallas fan, so anytime, and they put the camera on Jerry Jones more than any owner in the league.
Oh my goodness.
Every owner in the league put together.
Mm-hmm.
You could take the other 30 owners because Green Bay doesn't have one, and as a group, they don't get as much airtime as Jerry Jones does.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime they put his mug on the TV and he looks like he's ready to cry or ready to die, then that makes for a good football game.
It does. I agree.
But he's great. He at the same time, the guy is great. He has done so much for the National Football League.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at it, he
really has.
He brought the league into the modern world.
Yep.
And as far as marketing and sales and all this other stuff, and they were just so far behind, and now they're way ahead.
Yep. And he's shown other NFL team owners how to create their own revenue streams outside of what the NFL is doing, and so that's been really, really huge for NFL owners. This is the last play with Dak Prescott calling a draw play. It's 2nd down and 1. There's 14 seconds on the clock. There goes Dak. 11, 10, 9 seconds.
First of all, okay, here's what I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
In his mind, he knows there's 14 seconds.
Right. He should know.
And he knows how much time he needs to get, line everybody up and spike the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He ran 5 yards too far.
Yep, sure did.
Okay, so part of that you got to put on. I don't know if I mind the call, and the main reason is you want a little bit shorter pass for that final throw.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so he gets down to the 23-yard line. It looks like here, and what's the difference if he was at 27?
Exactly, I'm totally
nothing.
With you.
And there wouldn't have been the problem with the spiking of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So now I've heard some people say, well, the official screwed things up. No, you cannot snap the ball until the official spots the ball.
Right.
And the Dallas players were spotting the ball.
Right. The Dallas players are taught to hand the ball over to the official. So let me play it from here and give you what I had a problem with regarding the official. So the official is trailing the play too far behind. He was 25 yards behind, and he runs a 40-yard dash faster than any official I've seen to try to get there as quickly as possible. And what happens is he bumps into Dak Prescott. You'll see it right here. Bump, and then he double places the ball. You see him placing the ball closer.
Well, that's because Dallas had placed the ball, or the Dallas players had moved it, and he moved it back.
But why is that important for him to move it inches when it has no?
Well, it was really almost. I'm not gonna say a yard, but it was at least 1.5 feet.
Yeah.
But he just. But he's doing his job. And by rule, the official has to spot the ball. And at that point, the official had not spotted the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Can you nitpick and say, well, that's not fair? Well, hey, that's what they do for every other play in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not his fault it's the last play.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't usually stick up for the officials because sometimes their calls are terrible. But, they didn't do anything wrong there.
Yeah.
Not that I could see.
Yeah, I just feel like I have seen games, and in fact, I put this up on Twitter. Here's the play. So he put the center puts the ball down, and then he moves it, and then he moves it again. It's like, why are you moving it so much? It's like that second there could have been salvage for the Cowboys. Not that I wanted the Cowboys to win, trust me, but I just
I know. They weren't going to get. You know what? They weren't going to win the game anyway.
I agree with you.
I mean, what are the chances that they got a touchdown on that next play?
I did not have, by the way, everyone's saying, yeah, you had money on the game. No, I didn't. I just felt like the referees could have done a better job of getting that ball placed. The first mistake is that he's got, when Dak takes off, that umpire has to start running along with the team. He didn't start running until the play was dead. And so that cost him a second to get there. And then the double placement of the ball, that could have given the Cowboys time to spike the ball. And that was my only contention. It's not a big deal. Like I said, I didn't have money on the game. I don't like the Cowboys. I don't like any team in the NFL other than the Chicago Bears. So,
well, I think you got to, again, go back to what I said at the beginning. You had 14 seconds left, and you call a run play. Now, I don't have a problem with calling a run play, but you can't run 20 yards when you got 14 seconds left.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
Get your ass down and then, down, spike the ball so you've got time to live.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's
the clock's got to work up here.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it.
I haven't heard one person say that Dak is, some of this is on Dak.
Mm-hmm. By the way, did you see that the punter for the Dallas Cowboys punts up a ball and it hits the stadium scoreboard at that $1.6 billion stadium? It's like,
I didn't see the play. I knew it was going to happen sooner or later because guys have tried it. I mean, they come in for warm-ups.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, especially guys who haven't been in that stadium.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see if I can do it.
It's unbelievable that he did that, and they had to do a replay on it.
Is that what they did?
Okay. Yeah, the rule is you have to punt it over. It's a do-over, as the official said.
Well, I think that's fair because you can't just it's
right.
Oh, I don't even know what the word. It's interference, but
yeah, it is interference. So, Greg, let me show you this play from the Bears and Lions game a couple of years ago. Watch what the official does here. Kenny Galladay is going to catch a pass, and he's going to, as he's running back towards in between the hashes, he's going to veer to the right and add 2 yards to his reception. What does the official do? He immediately just puts the ball down because he knew the clock was managing quickly, and he didn't fuss with the ball. Watch. Let me make sure you got it here. Okay, yeah. So let me go full frame. Here's the throw. Galladay goes down. Watch him veer to the right, places the ball down. The official comes.
He gave him a 2-yard advantage. Then the official put the ball back a foot.
But it drives me crazy that there isn't a more scientific way to do this in a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Well, in a situation like that, I would think you should immediately blow the whistle, stop the clock for a second, and spot the ball. Now the team that's winning, they're going to be pissing and moaning. No, right. Hey, they used all their timeouts. That's their tough luck.
So isn't the college rule better? You pick up a first down, stop the clock until the chains have moved.
Yeah, and then I'll tell you what, in the last couple minutes, they're real slow. You might have 10 seconds before they start that clock again.
That is true. But I do like that rule better. I mean, there's so many. I wish I was.
They don't want the NFL game being like the college game that goes 3 hours and 40 minutes.
That is a problem. There's no doubt about that.
They got their windows.
Mm-hmm. There is no doubt about that. I have an image here. I lost it. Never mind. Off that topic. All right. Let's talk about the Chiefs and Steelers.
Yeah, I figured I didn't watch much of that one.
Okay, well,
I looked at I kept seeing the score going up and up and up, and I go, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. In the first quarter, the Chiefs had like 0 yards of offense, but by the end of the first half, they had over 300 yards. They really turned it on.
I got to be honest here. I got to have full disclosure.
Okay.
Were you a Ray Donovan fan?
Ray Donovan.
Showtime?
Oh, no, I have not seen it. I'm going to binge watch that someday because I hear it's great.
Okay, well, it was, they ended the show 2 years ago, and then but they did it without closing up all the loopholes.
Oh, so now that movie.
The movie was closing everything up.
And so you watched that yesterday.
Damn right. That was more important. I'm looking at the score, and I go, because I was like, okay, I'm going to tape Ray Donovan, and I'm going to watch the game. But no, the game was a blowout. So then I turned to wherever they were on Ray Donovan and then put it in reverse so I could go back to the beginning. And
yeah, I got to do a binge watch on that show because I've heard so many.
Well, you're going to be there's like 7 seasons or something.
I know. It builds up. So I wanted your thoughts on Ben Roethlisberger. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, right?
I would think so. Unless people want to hold some of the off-field issues against him. Yeah. He's getting in, put it that way.
Yeah.
Whether he's a first ballot, who knows? Is Devin going to be a first ballot? I know some voters that are not going to vote for him.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah.
Ever, you think?
No, they'll eventually vote for him, but they aren't voting this year.
Wow.
I know one in particular.
I hope it's not him.
Because I had an argument with him, and he was saying, well, if you go him, then why isn't this guy already in? Because he deserves it.
You can't judge that by other mistakes that have been done in the past.
Well, I'm just telling you. I'm not going to name him.
Oh, go ahead, name him.
No.
Initials?
Because you know the name, or you should anyway. But hey, is what it is. I hope he gets in, but I guarantee it's not a lock. Mm-hmm. It's not a lock that the people think it's. We're biased.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he changed the game. Mm-hmm. When you have rules changed because of you, you're worthy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. He's not a game changer. He's there's a bigger way of phrasing that. He's a rules changer, like you just said, so that means a lot. All right, your Bills, dominant performance this weekend. Anything you want to say about their 47-17 victory over the Patriots?
That was a thorough ass kicking. And I thought, looking, in the morning, I put out a tweet that I got a little heat on, and I said, 5 degrees, gonna be windy, advantage Bills. Mm-hmm. So somebody said, why? New England's cold. And they're getting a lot of feedback. I go, you haven't been to that stadium, have you? I've only been there. And I was a season ticket holder for 11 years. Mm-hmm. Before, and then I started working for the Giants, and so I gave them up. Been in that stadium a million times. It's about 4 miles from the lake. And that wind coming off the lake is huge on the windy days. And they're also in the snow belt. Mm-hmm. And weather plays a huge factor. And it's a lot tougher on the opponent. I don't care where they're from. Even if it was Green Bay, it's a lot tougher on the opponent. And it's one of the things I like about Josh Allen. He's a gamer. And when he goes into a game thinking, I'm going to kick your ass, mm-hmm. he kicks your ass mm-hmm. and rubs it in your face.
He does. He's got a great competitive spirit. I like that about him.
And so, that game was over in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. It was. And the other thing regarding the weather is that Mac Jones is just not accustomed to playing games in that kind of weather. So that was a big advantage, I think, for the Bills defense. And the Patriots couldn't run the ball like they have in other games where they tried to neutralize or lessen the onus on the quarterback. The Patriots didn't have any.
Well, they just played 2 weeks ago in New England, and Buffalo kicked their rear end then.
Yeah, it's clear who
so and they handled Mac Jones really well in that game. And I think you take all the credit in the world, Mac Jones. He had a hell of a rookie season, but now you put him a rookie quarterback in that situation, playoff football, against a hungry Bills team, different story.
Mm-hmm. And the final game prior to tonight's finale of the first round of the playoffs was the Bengals game, a big victory for Cincinnati over the Raiders. Any thoughts on that game?
No, in a way, I was pulling for the Raiders. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you why, just a little selfish part. Mm-hmm. I was hoping Versace would win because maybe it would help Tobe.
Yeah.
Now, how's that for logic?
And he still hasn't been named as a candidate anywhere, right?
No, and he probably won't. And hey, Dave makes a great living, so I'm not going to feel bad for him. But at the same time, he deserves a shot. He should be in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And anybody that's played for Dave will agree with me 100%.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I wanted to comment on or get your opinion on my belief that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to be an extraordinary quarterback wide receiver combination for years. In fact, that could be like a record-breaking combo. Like Manning and Harrison were, I forget who else deserves to be mentioned, but those two guys, man, they've got a quick chemistry going. It's going to be outstanding to follow those two guys.
And we got to be hopeful that they get a situation like that.
Yeah. There was a question earlier. Somebody asked, do you think that the Bears should make a trade for a wide receiver this offseason? And then somebody suggested to me, why not? Why shouldn't the Bears think about trading Robert Quinn for Calvin Ridley? And I look at their salaries; they're almost identical. They have 1 year left.
You restructured Quinn though this year, and the cap hit.
To move him would be
no, you can't. And who's more valuable to your football team, a pass rusher or a pass receiver?
Well, in today's football, I would say it's a lot closer than ever before, but definitely a pass rusher.
Okay, and you win football, you got to have a quarterback, you got to have offensive line, you got to have a defensive line. Mm-hmm. Those are the first things you got to take care of. Mm-hmm. Then you fill in. You've got a good receiver in Mooney. You've got to get the guy across from him. Mm-hmm. There's going to be, they might get a guy that you're going to go, huh? And I got a couple names, and I'll wait till we get close to free agent to see if he actually, right now he'll be a free agent, but whether he's going to be a free agent in March remains to be seen. I got a couple names that I like. We'll see. And you don't, and there's one that I'm really warming up to. I'm starting to watch some tape, and you look at his numbers and you go, I don't know. And I'm thinking, no, I think you put this guy, because again, now I'm assuming Daboll is going to get the job, and I'm looking at how he uses receivers, and he's got big guys, he's got little guys.
Interesting.
Like Isaiah McKenzie's 5'7".
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And the slot guy is 5'9", Beasley. Diggs is only 5'11 and a half. He's just a little bit, he's heavier. He's probably got 10, 12 pounds on Mooney. Mm-hmm. He's bulkier.
Yeah, right.
About the same height. Maybe Diggs a half inch taller. But then they got Gabriel Davis, he's like 6'3", 220. And he's really come on this year. He was a guy that I thought would come on for them this year. And he did the second half of the season because of some injuries at the other positions. So, I mean, they've got all different types, but they all play a very big role within that offense. And when you look at the running backs Buffalo has compared to Chicago, what's his name? Singleton or Singletary, whatever the hell his name is. Singletary would be number 3 here.
Yeah. Do you think that Tariq Cohen's days with the Chicago Bears are over?
I don't know the answer to that because there's medical issues there that we're never going to hear about. Yeah. And so, there's rumors that he had a second surgery. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
He looked pretty good, running around the field and all that, but he wasn't ready to play this year. And, whether he's going to be good to go next year and you know what, it's not even going to be up to Tariq Cohen. It's going to be up to whoever the next coach is and the GM because they're going to make the decision.
Right. And
how they can use him.
Right. And I'm sure they'll get input from the medical staff, but it can't be.
Oh, well,
good.
that's I mean, the doctors, because you have a postseason now, it'll probably get pushed back now, until they make the hire. So you've got a head coach and maybe your coordinators and your GM, and then you're going to have a meeting because I've sat in those meetings several times, and you're going over most of the roster, especially the guys that got issues, and the doctors give their opinion. And I'll tell you, that medical team is very, very good. So, they'll tell you. I mean, and they're not going to, especially they tell you stories from the draft because they don't know the guys in the draft. They look at, they're examining them and they're putting a grade on them. Just like a scout puts a grade on it, the medical people put a grade on it.
Right.
And so I remember there was one guy we were talking about that we really liked. Jerry and I really liked it, and the scout from that area really liked. But he had an issue at the combine. He had an arthritic knee. And so doctor goes, no, he's got an arthritic knee. And Jerry goes, yeah, but I really like him. He goes, Jerry, you might get 3 years out of him, and you might not. So why? And you know what? He was 100% correct. When you end up watching the careers of these guys, they're probably right 90% of the time. And, I know from dealing with these guys that there's some issues that they worry about more than others. They're both, the two orthopedic guys are both excellent shoulder guys. So if you get a guy with a torn labrum or something like that, he goes, yeah, he played during the year, we'll fix it after.
Interesting.
Yeah, not a big deal, and he'd be good to go. But now you get a guy with an arthritic knee, different story.
Totally different, huh?
Because there's no cure, and it never gets better. It only gets worse. So now you do your research and you say, okay, did he miss practice in college? How many games did he miss? How many practices did he miss because of that particular injury or condition? Okay, well, if he's missing time in college, damn well he's going to miss time in the pros. And so you're taking that all into consideration. So now you get back to Tariq Cohen. He's missed really 4 games he played in?
Correct.
In 2020, maybe 3 or 4 games in 2020. And then so he missed all of that. He had surgery right away. He generally speaking, you can come back in 10 months.
Right.
And maybe even quicker with some guys. I mean, everybody's different as far as how they react to a surgery. But you can use averages. And yet, there was obviously some complications because now it's been, you're talking 14, 15 months, and he wasn't able to step on the field this year. Now, again, we don't know exactly what those complications are, but that medical staff will spell it out to the new GM and the coach, and then they'll make a decision.
Well, I wish him a lot of luck because he's been such a dynamic player. I'm assuming you're going to watch tonight's game between the Cardinals and the Rams. Do you have a favorite team that you think is going to win, or a team that you're just pulling for?
Well, I got some friends that work for the Rams, so I guess I gotta pull for the Rams.
Was it a mistake for the Bears to allow Leonard Floyd to go to the Rams?
Yeah,
I think so too. I mean, gosh,
he has been great in their locker room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that was a big mistake. It wasn't a little mistake. That was a big mistake.
Yep.
Okay, and they're looking at it. So, okay, whose fault was it? Was it his, or was it the people coaching him?
Which is interesting because Brandon Staley was coaching him, and he had something to do with getting him to go to the Rams.
But when you talk to people at the Rams, they love him. They absolutely love him.
Yep.
They thought he was the key acquisition a year ago. Was him.
Interesting. Well, I can't wait to watch this game tonight. It should be a fun way to end this first round of the playoffs. Greg, I want to thank you very much for giving us
one other thing. I don't like the idea of having a Monday night game in the playoffs.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Why?
I think it's a competitive disadvantage for the two teams.
Yeah.
They got a short week
preparing
for the divisional round. The winner of the one team is going to have the winner, whoever wins the game, is going to have a short week. They're going to play Sunday, and they're not even playing the later game. The late game on Sunday has already been determined. It's Kansas City and Buffalo. So it's going to be the early game on Sunday, and it's a short week. In the playoffs, I don't think that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, but then again, it's all about the money. How that?
No, I hear that, but I just you can't put a team at a competitive disadvantage. Granted, they had an extra day to prepare, but still, they've already played 17 games. These guys' bodies have already, taken a pretty good beating.
I think if they're going to expand the NFL playoffs, like a lot of people are talking about, one more regular season game and maybe another playoff round in the future. Oh my goodness!
I don't think you'll see it. I really don't. But I think personally, I don't think the union's that strong. Mm-hmm. I mean, compared to the baseball union, they're nothing. The the strength of the baseball union's got the strongest union in pro sports.
And anything, I think.
And that goes back years and years. But I think the players would finally put their foot down in a situation like that. There's a lot of players didn't want to play 17 games, and then if they try to go 18, I don't see it happening.
Mm-hmm. Take Ravi's advice. He says, hit the like button. That'll help us get more views on YouTube. And this show will shortly be on our audio version on the Barroom Network audio feed. So let your friends and family members know that Greg Gabriel Talks Football is a great hour and 40-minute show. Greg, you're the absolute best. Can't wait to our next conversation. We'll let people know. I'll do a better job next time of letting people know what our start time is. I had a lot of people at the beginning of the show saying, I didn't know you were going to have a show tonight. That was my fault. Sorry.
Well, we had other things going on.
Yeah, we had a few other things going on.
And without saying, is everything cool?
Yes and no. I'll talk to you about that offline.
Okay.
And again, thanks a lot for watching. For those of you who commented live, really appreciate it. And again, the show will be available on demand, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
See you later.